I smiled, reached into my bag, and handed over my company's laptop, still warm from the spreadsheet I'd been updating 15 minutes earlier. Then I pulled out the key ring. Clink, clink, clink. 12 silver keys, all labeled, all tagged in my own handwriting from 2005 when I rewired the access system myself because the vendor disappeared mid-upgrade. And then I gave them the final one. A small brass key with a worn-down S etched into the handle. The key to the building. No one flinched. Not HR, not security. They had no idea what I just handed them, but they would. 30 minutes later, my phone rang. Unknown number, but I knew the voice. Why are we locked out of our own offices? Miles screamed, his voice cracking with panic. I leaned back in my chair and looked out at the quiet street. You told me to return company property, I said. So I did. Let me rewind. 21 years. That's how long I kept that place running. Not just operations, not just facilities, not just budgets and compliance. Everything. Back when the company had 6 employees and a rented suite above a laundromat in Brooklyn, I showed up with a notebook, a toolbox, and a belief that if you fix the small things, the big things won't break. They didn't even have a business license in the right city. Guess who fixed that? I wasn't in management. Not on paper. Never got the corner office or the bonus trips to Miami. My title changed a dozen times over the years. Administrator, ops coordinator, office manager, facility specialist. One CEO once called me office dad, like that was supposed to be cute. But when a pipe burst at 3 in the morning or someone crashed the server by downloading 500 stock photos of smiling business people, they called me. Can you just? They'd say, and I always could, and I always did. You'd think they'd remember that when the layoff started, but no. HR sent me a calendar invite with no subject line, just quick sync. Tuesday, 9 a.m. Conference room B. I already knew. The office was buzzing with whispers. Budget cuts, restructuring, strategic pivots. Miles had just hired a new consulting firm to reimagine our corporate strategy. Cost $200,000, but apparently my salary was where they drew the line. I showed up at 8:55. I always showed up early. Habit. Conference room B smelled like nervous sweat and burnt coffee. Haley from HR sat across from me, straight-backed, expression practiced. Next to her, someone new from legal. Not even a hello. We're going in a new direction, Haley said. I nodded. Your role has been deemed redundant. I trained 6 people last year. One of them now had director in their email signature. Redundant, huh? They slid the folder across the table like it was an offering. 3 months severance, no acknowledgement, no handshake, no thank you. Return all company assets by the end of day, the lawyer added, including keys, ID badge, electronics, and any property belonging to the organization. I just stared at them, let the silence stretch long enough for someone to shift uncomfortably. And then I smiled. Want to know what they forgot? They forgot I was the one who signed the original lease. Back when the founder's credit score looked like a rejected exam grade. No one else could get approved. So I stepped in, just to help. I'll help, I'd said. They forgot I was still listed as the primary leaseholder. Never updated it. Never questioned it. Even after they moved floors, remodeled, doubled in staff, my name remained. I'd reminded the old CEO once back in 2012. He laughed and said, well, if anything ever goes south, I guess you own the place. We both chuckled. I didn't bring it up again. So when I handed over the building keys that morning, I knew exactly what would happen. By 9:32, I'd already called the property manager. By 10 o'clock, the locks had been changed. By 10:27, Miles called me in a full-blown meltdown. You can't just lock us out, he shouted. Read the lease, I said calmly. You don't own the office. You rented it from me, and you failed to renew it. He went quiet for a second. You wouldn't dare. Should have thought of that before you let security escort me out of a building I legally control. They thought they fired me. What they didn't realize was they evicted themselves. This wasn't revenge. Not yet. But it was justice. Corporate justice. The quiet kind. The kind that walks out with a folder in one hand and 21 years of leverage in the other. And now, the countdown has begun. 30 days to vacate, unless they wanted to deal with me. By the time Miles's angry voicemail finished blaring through my phone, I'd already lit a vanilla candle and poured myself a cup of green tea. He was screaming something about breach of protocol, miscommunication, and legal action. But all I heard was panic wrapped in entitlement. I didn't reply. I didn't need to, because I had the lease. And more importantly, I had time. Let's rewind a bit further, back to May when I first noticed something wasn't right. I was sorting through the monthly vendor invoices. Normally, I'd get a renewal notice from the property management company around that time of year. I remembered it like clockwork. Always a quiet little PDF attachment with lease renewal confirmation in the subject line. But this year, nothing. I flagged it mentally, not out of spite, just habit. It's what I did. I noticed things. Then I got curious. I opened my old ops backup folder on my personal drive, the one I was never technically supposed to keep, but did anyway. There it was. The original lease, signed July 2001, co-signed by me. Not as a witness, as a tenant of record. I'd only agreed to it back then because the founder, Jeremy, asked nicely. Just until we get the credits sorted, he said. I'll owe you forever. Forever turned out to mean exactly 18 months, until the company started pulling in revenue. Then it was like I disappeared. Except I didn't, because no one ever changed the leaseholder. Not when we expanded. Not when we moved up 2 floors. Not when Jeremy stepped down and Miles took over. My name was still on every amendment, every upgrade, every renewal clause. And then I saw it. Section 4B. If lease renewal is not submitted in writing by the leaseholder within 30 calendar days of expiration, the tenancy reverts to month at property management's discretion. Failure to maintain active tenancy may result in forfeiture of occupancy rights. In other words, they missed the deadline, and I still had control. That was May 15th. They fired me on June 30th. I could have warned them, sent a quiet reminder, a nudge. Hey, just checking on that renewal. But they didn't even look me in the eye during my termination meeting. Didn't thank me, didn't acknowledge the 2 decades I gave them, just handed me a standard form letter and walked me out like a temp. So no, I didn't remind them. I waited. And on July 1st, with the renewal window long closed and no communication from them to legal, I walked into the property manager's office, calm, collected, and carrying a manila folder labeled in black Sharpie. 2001 to 2024. Lease control documents. Thomas, the property manager, blinked at me like he was seeing a ghost. Sean, in the flesh. He pulled up the records while I unpacked the documents, laying them out like a courtroom drama. Lease amendments, email printouts, signed service agreements. All roads led to me. When he saw the missing renewal confirmation, he looked up slowly. They didn't send anything? Nope. And you're terminating? Yep. He ran a hand through his thinning hair. This is going to get messy. That's not my department anymore, I said. By the time word reached Miles, it was already too late. Locks were rekeyed. Mail was being redirected. A new tenant, an AI health startup called Neuralink, had already signed the next lease at double the rate. Apparently, they'd been waiting for a chance to get that office space for months. All they needed was a vacancy, and I just created one. That evening, I got a call from Kenny, my longtime friend and real estate attorney. He'd helped review the lease when I first signed it back in the days when we both still had flip phones and carried pagers to work. You sure you want to go through with this? He asked. They made the decision for me, I replied. I wasn't looking for revenge. I wasn't even angry anymore. What I felt was clarity and the kind of freedom that only comes after years of being overlooked. They forgot the rules. I remembered every clause. They discarded me. I held the deed to their future in my filing cabinet. They underestimated me. I let them. And now, the countdown was real. 28 days to vacate, and the clock had already started. Back at the office, chaos was beginning to boil. Miles called the property manager, got nowhere. Haley from HR emailed me politely, asking if I'd be willing to assist in resolving a sudden real estate oversight. I didn't respond. Instead, I updated my lease termination file and added a sticky note, do not engage. Let the paperwork do the talking. Because they may have fired me, but I still held the pen. The first real sign of panic came 3 days later. It wasn't the flurry of emails from Haley's HR team or the sudden uptick in LinkedIn messages from people who had once walked past my desk without so much as a good morning. It wasn't even Miles's third voicemail, which alternated between fake concern and veiled legal threats. It was Dan. Dan from facilities, the only person in that building besides me who ever knew where the breaker box was without asking. He texted at 7:46 in the morning. Hey, Sean, did you change the HVAC provider login? I stared at the message for a long moment, coffee mug in hand. The question felt simple, but what it really meant was something else entirely. It meant, the building doesn't know how to breathe without you. Back when we first moved into that space in 2008, the HVAC system was a disaster. Old coils, miswired thermostats, and a basement unit that looked like it had survived the Cold War. The vendors were useless, overpriced, and mostly forgot we existed. So I learned it myself. Spent a weekend crawling through manuals and YouTube tutorials, translating technician language into something usable. I created a custom binder with colored tabs for every vent zone, pressure reading, and sensor quirk. Nobody asked me to do that, but everyone relied on it. By 2010, we stopped outsourcing entirely. I negotiated the service contracts, managed the accounts, and rerouted the payment structure through a shared ops business account under my name with full administrative access. Nobody ever changed that. So when Dan tried to log in only to find that the two-factor authentication was routed to a number no longer on the company payroll, he messaged the only person he trusted to tell the truth. Me. I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't want to help Dan. He was one of the good ones. Quiet, competent, never talked down to me even though he was 15 years younger and built like a construction worker. But because I needed them to feel it, just a little. To feel what it's like when the lights flicker and nobody knows which breaker trips when the espresso machine and server rack are both running. To feel what it's like when you fire your infrastructure and then realize your infrastructure had a name. By Friday, the signs were all there. The printer jammed on floor 3. Nobody could fix it. The cleaning service didn't show up. A notice from the city arrived, overdue utility payment. They'd apparently been trying to route payments through an old P.O. box that was deactivated 4 years ago. Every system, every tiny cog I'd maintained in total silence, started stalling. And that's when the panic turned into desperation. That afternoon, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was Nicole, one of the newer executives in the finance department. We'd only exchanged a few pleasantries during her onboarding, but I remembered she brought in bagels for the team one morning and made sure to leave one at reception for me. "Sean," she asked hesitantly, "I know this is awkward, but I was wondering if you had a minute." There was something in her voice I hadn't heard in a while from anyone in that company. Respect, and maybe, just maybe, remorse. We met at a small cafe halfway between my house and the office. Neutral territory. She wore business casual. I wore jeans and a sweater with the fraying sleeves I refused to throw away. She didn't waste time. "I wasn't part of the decision," she said, "but I wanted to say I'm sorry for how it happened." I nodded. "Thank you. We're struggling," she admitted. "Haley's flailing. Legal is overwhelmed. Miles is yelling at everyone. And honestly, I don't think anyone knew how much you were actually doing. That much was obvious." She hesitated. "I don't expect you to help, but if you have any guidance on what we're missing or what steps we can take." I sipped my tea. Then I asked a question I knew would stop her cold. "Who's listed as the leaseholder on your general liability insurance policy?" Her eyes widened. I don't know exactly. I let that sit, because it wasn't just the lease. It was everything. The compliance protocols, the IT vendor authorizations, the janitorial service renewals, the pest control contract, the security codes for the underground parking garage. All of it ran through me. Not out of ego, out of necessity. Because over 2 decades of being just admin, I became something else, the spine of the building, and now they were trying to walk without it. That night, I sat down at my kitchen table with a fresh notebook labeled in the front, Endgame, Q3 Transition Plan. Not for them, for me, because it was time to do what I'd done every quarter for the past 21 years. Prepare for what comes next. I got the confirmation email from the court on a Tuesday afternoon. Subject line, Notice of Acceptance. Timestamp, 3:17 p.m. I sat at my dining table, laptop open, a manila folder beside me labeled in block letters. Termination final. Attached was the official notice. Plaintiff, Sean G. Harrison. Defendant, current occupant, Suite 2011 to 221. Cause: failure to renew lease within contracted window. Order: 30-day notice to vacate property, effective immediately. Enforcement: authorized upon delivery of notice. I didn't smile. Not out of bitterness, but because when you've spent your life cleaning up messes for people who never once said thank you, justice doesn't look like a celebration. It looks like clarity. The next step was routine. Print 3 copies of the eviction notice. One for the property manager, one for the county court, and one for the door. Thomas, the building's property manager, met me outside the main entrance the next morning. He had a clipboard under one arm and an expression that hovered between awkward and impressed. "You sure about this, Sean?" "I've been sure since the day they walked me out like a temp who forgot his badge." He nodded, handed me a zip tie. We walked up to the front doors. Glass panels smudged from too many hands and too few cleanings. The receptionist, someone new, probably another temp, watched us approach, confused. She leaned forward. "Can I help you?" Thomas cleared his throat. "Just delivering legal documentation." She blinked. "Do I need to?" "No," I interrupted gently. "Just tell your boss to check the front door." I zip-tied the fluorescent orange eviction notice right at eye level. It flapped slightly in the breeze. Bold font, black letters, 30-day deadline, stamped with the official seal. That was August 6th, which meant by September 5th, they'd be gone, either voluntarily or with county enforcement. I could already feel the storm forming inside. By 10:12, Miles had seen the notice. By 10:17, my phone buzzed with a call from Haley. I didn't answer. By 10:24, she texted, "Sean, what is this? Why would you do this? Please call me ASAP." I didn't, because what was there to say? They'd built a company on the backs of people like me and convinced themselves that we were interchangeable. But here's the thing about infrastructure. It only seems invisible when it works. When it stops, everything breaks at once. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, their legal team had finally opened the scanned documents from the court. Nicole from finance forwarded me a screenshot. Subject: urgent, leaseholder confirmation. Plaintiff: Sean Harrison. Subhead: eviction proceedings initiated. It included the scanned lease, my signature, the missed renewal clause, and the updated clause from 2013 that gave the leaseholder sole right to terminate with 30-day notice in the event of non-renewal. All legally binding, all enforceable, no loopholes, no backup plan. No one had even bothered to read the contract before firing the man whose name was on it. That evening, Dan texted again. "They're freaking out. HVAC went down again and no one can get in touch with the contractor." They thought the autopay was still working. It wasn't, because that autopay came from a shared ops account I closed the day after they terminated me. Then another message. Also, Haley said the new cleaning crew quit. Something about unpaid invoices from last month. Yep, because that contract was under a month-to-month agreement I managed directly. They hadn't even updated the payment info. One by one, the pillars were crumbling. Not because I broke them, because I'd held them up for 21 years. And when they let me go, they didn't know how to replace me. You can't replace something you never bothered to understand. On Friday, I received an email from Miles. Subject: urgent, request for discussion, lease and operational oversight. His tone had changed. Gone was the arrogance, the condescension, the assumption that I was some middle-aged fixture collecting a paycheck. Now he was asking, not ordering. He wanted to find a resolution. He wanted clarity on next steps. He even ended the message with, "I appreciate everything you've done." Too late. That night, I sat in my backyard with a beer, watching the sun dip behind the fence line. My old dog, Rex, lay beside me on the deck. He panted like he knew something big had shifted. I thought about all the times I stayed late for them. The office holiday parties I helped organize without pay. The dozens of onboarding manuals I built from scratch. The night I missed my brother's wedding because someone jammed a badge in the elevator slot and nobody else knew how to reset the system. And then I thought about how they fired me. No handshake, no farewell, just HR, a security guard, and a cardboard box. So no, I wasn't taking Miles's meeting because the countdown had already begun. They say corporate culture is about resilience, adaptability, and quick thinking. But what happens when the very foundation you built your company on walks out the door, holding the original lease agreement and 3 decades of institutional memory? You get Monday, August 19th, 17 days before the eviction deadline. The morning started like any other, for me at least. Coffee, quiet jazz on the radio, Rex curled under the kitchen table, chasing dreams. I was working on a jigsaw puzzle. 1,000 pieces, a lighthouse scene. Therapeutic, clean edges, clear rules. Meanwhile, for blocks away, the walls were closing in. At exactly 8:12, I got a message from Nicole. Just a heads up. HR's in full damage control mode. They tried to call the landlord, but got nowhere. Dan says they asked him to break into the maintenance closet. He refused, said it felt illegal. I grinned. A minute later, Dan texted me directly. They're calling it a rogue lease situation. Miles said he's launching a formal internal review, whatever that means. Translation, he's blaming everyone but himself. Classic. Then, just before lunch, my phone rang again. Private number. I was tempted to ignore it, but curiosity won. Sean speaking. The voice on the other end hesitated. Hi. This is Clara. I'm the executive assistant to the board chair. Clara. I vaguely remembered her from holiday parties. Always polite, always overworked. I was asked to reach out. The board would like to schedule a conversation, off the record, about the lease situation. We're hoping to get your perspective. There it was. Not the CEO, not HR, not legal. The board. They'd realized what Miles never did. The only person with leverage in this mess was the one they let go without a second thought. I stayed quiet for a beat, then said, I'm not sure I have any perspective that wasn't clearly outlined in the documents I submitted. Clara paused. I understand. It's just. The board wasn't made aware of your status as leaseholder. They're concerned. I bet they were. Investor pressure, press inquiries, operational shutdowns, no plan B. They wanted to talk. They wanted me to fix the problem they created. But here's the thing about leverage. Once you give it up, it's gone. And I'd already decided this was closure, not collaboration. I'm not available for meetings, I said gently. But I wish you the best of luck. She thanked me anyway. At least someone had manners. By midweek, it was obvious the cracks were becoming fractures. Dan called during his lunch break. They tried to host an all-hands meeting to reassure everyone, he said. Miles called it a misunderstanding in paperwork logistics. I snorted. Is that what they're calling a court order now? He laughed, but it was strained. They're losing people. Real talent. The marketing director gave notice. The IT lead is interviewing elsewhere. No one wants to stay on a sinking ship. Good for them. Honestly, Dan said, good for you. He paused, then added something I hadn't expected. You were the best part of that building, Sean. You didn't just keep it running. You cared about it, about us. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Thanks, Dan. That means a lot. That evening, I opened my old company inbox. Technically, it was deactivated, but they forgot to kill the cloud sync to my personal archive folder. Another oversight. I wasn't snooping. I just wanted one thing. My original onboarding email. Found it. Dated July 8th, 2001. Subject, Welcome to the team, Sean. The message body was simple, short, written by Jeremy, the founder. Thanks for taking a chance on us. We'll never forget what you're doing by helping us get on our feet. This company will always have room for you. Always. Huh. I printed it out, taped it to my fridge. Not out of spite. Just a reminder that promises don't mean much unless the people making them remember. By the end of that week, Haley sent a mass email to former staff, anyone who'd been part of operations in the last 10 years. Subject, Request for shared documentation, critical systems access. Body. We're reaching out to former team members who may still have knowledge of legacy systems, access information, or vendor contacts that were not properly transferred during previous transitions. Any assistance would be appreciated during this period of restructuring. Translation. We're out of lifelines. At 11:24 that Friday morning, Miles made one final move. He showed up at my house. I watched him from behind the blinds, standing awkwardly in my driveway, hands in his pockets, glancing up at the front door like a man who realized too late that the elevator wasn't coming back down. He didn't knock. He just stood there, maybe trying to build the courage, maybe just hoping I'd come out. I didn't. Rex watched him too, perched by the front window like a loyal guardian protecting his territory. After 3 minutes, Miles turned and walked back to his car. No words, no apology, just a man finally realizing the cost of forgetting the person who held the keys. September 5th. Eviction day. The morning sun stretched across the city like a curtain, slowly pulling back on a final act. I stood by my window, sipping black coffee from a chipped ceramic mug I'd kept since my first office job. Rex curled by my feet, flicking his tail in slow, lazy motions. Across town, for blocks away, Suite 2011 to 221 was no longer theirs. The orange notice stayed on the door until 8:07 when the county marshal showed up with a clipboard, a neutral expression, and a roll of industrial-grade zip ties. Protocol, no drama, no exceptions. That office had once buzzed with over 90 employees, open concept floor plan, glass-walled conference rooms, plants named by interns, an espresso machine that hissed like a dying engine, and printers that jammed only during board presentations. Now silent. Furniture half-packed, desks still labeled with names that had already disappeared from Slack. Empty energy drink cans stacked in recycling bins that no one had emptied in over a week. Whiteboards filled with half-erased strategy scribbles. A single exercise ball abandoned in the hallway. And a notice taped to the door that read plainly, "Vacate order executed. Tenant removal complete." They didn't go quietly. Of course they didn't. Miles had spent the final week trying every route possible. A last-minute letter from a law firm that clearly hadn't read the full lease. A phone call to the building owner who redirected him back to the property manager who redirected him back to me. An offer to negotiate terms via Haley, who wrote that she hoped we could find a collaborative solution that benefits all parties. I didn't answer that one either, because what was left to say? I hadn't sabotaged them. I hadn't leaked anything. I hadn't aired their dirty laundry or rallied angry ex-employees. All I did was stop holding the door open. And without me, the whole place shut down on its own. Dan texted me that morning. "It's over. They're gone. The place looks like someone unplugged the ambition and forgot to charge it again." He sent a photo. Empty floors. Chairs stacked in corners. The ghost of an empire that forgot who built its foundation. Then a second photo. It was my old desk, still there, shoved near the break room. A small framed photo of Rex sat on the shelf. I hadn't even realized I'd left it. Underneath it, a sticky note. "Miss you already. Dan." I walked to the closet in my hallway and pulled out the folder labeled "Closure." Inside, all the documents, lease termination confirmation, final payment receipts, eviction order acknowledgement, the contract from Neuralink, the AI startup moving in next week. Clean, clear, sealed. The new tenants had already begun painting the walls something fresh, muted, modern. They'd sent me a gift basket, artisanal coffee, a handwritten note. "Thank you for making space for us. We'll treat it well." They even asked if I'd consider consulting during their transition. I said I'd think about it. At 12:34, I got one final email from Miles. No subject line, no caps, just, "I made a mistake. You didn't deserve how we treated you. You were more than just staff. You were the foundation." I didn't see it until it was too late. No request, no question, just words. That was the first honest thing I'd heard from him in years. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't reply. Some doors don't need reopening. That evening, I walked to the kitchen drawer, reached in, and pulled out the old brass key, the one with the worn S etched into the handle. It didn't unlock anything anymore, but it had once unlocked everything. And now it was mine to keep. Not because it gave me access, but because it represented value. Proof that I'd been there, that I mattered, even when no one noticed. I hung it on the small hook next to my front door, right between my first paycheck stub from 1983 and the handwritten note Jeremy gave me the day we moved into the downtown office. "This place only works because of you. Don't let us forget that." They forgot, but I didn't. You see, this story isn't about revenge. It's about being erased quietly, systematically, until one day you're just gone. And they don't even feel the difference. Until everything falls apart. And then they remember, too late. It's about leverage. Not the kind you swing around, the kind you earn quietly over time, piece by piece, by being the one who shows up early, by fixing the leak no one else notices, by remembering the password, by holding the key. The next morning, I took a walk downtown, passed by the office building out of curiosity. The new sign was already up, Suite 2011 to 221, Neuralink headquarters. The windows were clean. A delivery truck was parked outside. New beginnings. I didn't stop, didn't linger, just smiled, took a sip of my coffee, and kept walking. Wind in my hair, peace in my chest, closure in my pocket. Because I gave back everything they asked for. And I left with everything they didn't even know I owned.